All right, well, we are going to go ahead and get started, and then as folks join us, they'll be able to follow along. Um, so, to start, I wanted to lay out a brief agenda here. So I thought it would be helpful to go through and talk about tracking numbers to start. So how to set up a tracking number, how are they used, best practices for implementing tracking numbers in your advertising. Secondly, wanted to go over reporting. Obviously, that's a very critical part of this service, so we wanted to make sure everybody's aware of the most popular and, is, in our view, important reports, and then best practices for how to integrate them into your daily workflow so that you're able to use them to impact your decisions. And then talk a little bit about tools and administration. So what are some of the settings and integrations that'll be important as you think about how to best leverage this software? And then we also want to leave some time for Q&A at the end. Now, having said that, definitely if there are any urgent questions that come up as I'm presenting, feel free to use the chat button. You'll see in your Join.me bar, there's a chat button that you can use. Feel free to pop in a question if you feel like it would help the conversation. I'm happy to try to address those in the moment. Some of them, if they may be a little bit more in depth, I might defer those until the end, but definitely feel free to put those out there. Also, just one other logistical notice, if you are having a hard time reading the screen for any reason, you do have a zoom bar. I don't have a zoom in bar on or button on my Join.me panel, but all of the participants do. So you can use that little zoom bar. Yours is right here where in the middle where the circular button in the middle. And also, if you want to, in the chat button in your Join.me bar, you can identify yourself, or actually, I'm sorry, with the little person icon. You can click on that and identify yourself so that as you're asking questions, I'll know who it is. So with that, we can go ahead and get started. Some things to start, I thought it would be good to talk about a few of the stories that we've been hearing recently across the past month from our customers who have been using this tracking software to have impact on their advertising. One of our customers we talked to recently learned that they spent $30,000 in 1 month just to get 20 phone calls from display advertising. They had thought that this was a really important channel for them because they got so many clicks every day from it. Most of their conversions happen offline, so until they started using our software, they weren't able to get a sense of how the clicks were resulting in offline conversions. So they saw that this was actually a very expensive channel for them. PPC versus SEO. This is another use case that is often cited from our customers as they talk about how they've used this service. This particular customer we talked to a couple of weeks ago learned that it cost them $100 on average to generate a call from Google AdWords and less than $10 to generate a call from Google Organic. So obviously they made some reallocations in how they were thinking about their marketing budget. And then finally, we talked to a customer recently, a national daycare company, about how they'd been using the service. And they had an interesting use case where all of their conversions happen offline because they're a daycare company. You can't sign up online. So the only data that they had been measuring was clicks. They learned quickly that the campaigns that have the best click rates were most of the time also those that had the most calls, but not always. There were a few campaigns that were generating a lot of clicks, but very few conversions. So they were able to make some tweaks and increase their return on investment on their PPC budget at 25% within just 2 months. So we thought those were some interesting stories to kind of get us started. Let's go ahead and jump in and talk about tracking numbers here. And another logistical note, if there's any issues with you being able to see my screen or hear me, just feel free to use that chat button there to let me know. I'm happy to make any adjustments. So starting really high level, how does a tracking number work? Tracking numbers appear in your advertising. That can be in offline ads such as radio or print or any on your website. In general, you want to set up a tracking number for each advertising source that you want to track. Tracking numbers can be set up very simply. They just need a receiving number, which is a place to ring to, and they need something that they're tracking. We call that a source. Each time a call comes in through one of those tracking numbers, if it's an online source that you're tracking, such as Google Paid, our system's going to try and match a website visitor to that caller. So you'll be able to see important website information associated with that particular caller. A little bit here just about the technology around how we make that match, because a lot of people often ask us about this. Each time somebody calls in, you'll see the little person with the phone. Our system looks at all the people that have recently been to your website, and it uses a lot of different data points, such as location of caller, location of IP addresses of visits, time of call, time of website visits, factors all of that in, and assigns likelihoods to each of your visitors, and it will tell you that how sure we are that this particular website visitor was this caller. And you'll see what the system does is it assigns the highest likelihood visitor with that particular caller. So that's just a little bit about how it works. It's a matching algorithm. It's a proprietary algorithm that we've developed, and it's something that really differentiates how we match visitors to callers than how you're probably used to seeing it if you've used any other call tracking vendors. It's also why you'll see in the call log in a little bit when I show you, you're going to see a likelihood score for each of your visitors that are matched to a caller. The question we often get is, how many tracking numbers do I need? In general, the more granular your tracking numbers, the more granular reporting is going to be. So for example, if you have one tracking number for referral, so basically anybody coming to your website from another site, that's going to be pretty general. Whereas if you have a tracking number for each specific potential referring domain, your reporting is going to be very specific. Also, for example, if you're going to use tracking numbers at conferences, maybe on like your banner stands or things like that, have a tracking number for each conference rather than just having one tracking number for all of your conferences. That way you're able to get really specific and know which conference is really having the best impact. For online sources, in general, we recommend that you should have one tracking number for that source for every 100 daily visitors coming from that source. So you'll see in the example, if you have 500 daily visitors from Google Paid, you should have 5 tracking numbers with the source Google Paid. And the reason for that is, I remember in the last slide I showed you that matching algorithm. That makes sure that your accuracy data stays very high so that we're very confident in our ability to match visitors to your callers. So just kind of keep that rule of thumb, and it's very easy to set up these little pools of tracking numbers. You would just simply set up 5 tracking numbers with the source Google Paid. There's nothing special that you need to do. But you just want to keep an eye on that, and if you start to see your accuracy scores come down, you probably want to get a couple more tracking numbers for that particular online source. You don't have to worry about this for offline sources. This is just for online sources. You may want to have little pools of numbers. Some best practices here for tracking numbers. In talking with customers who we've seen really effectively use these, they track anything that they spend money on, from business cards to press releases. I mentioned conferences, things that you may not ordinarily think of, and I'm sure there's a lot of things we haven't even thought of. But really, if you want to know what kind of return you're getting on that investment, then you should be tracking it. And then also get specific. I mentioned this. Track down to referring URL level as much as possible. So if there's specific directories that you're paying to be on, set up a tracking number for each of those so you're really able to understand which sources of traffic are really having the best impact for you. So now we're going to talk about setting up a tracking number. So I'm going to actually switch over into the interface here. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to be in a few different demo accounts as I'm showing you different aspects of the system. The first thing is I'm in the system right now under the tracking numbers page. And so this is just where you're able to see all your tracking numbers listed in one place. As you've probably seen as you've set up your accounts, if you've recently set up your accounts, it's very easy and quick to buy tracking numbers. And the system makes it very easy to do multiple numbers at a time. So if you were looking for a 410 number and you wanted to add 5 at a time, maybe you have 500 visitors and you wanted to do 5 of them for Google Paid, you can add them all over here, choose the source Google Paid, and apply them to all. You could choose your receiving number, apply it to all, click Buy Numbers, and there you go. They're all set up. So we try to make that really easy for you to set up those numbers quickly. If I go back to our tracking numbers that we already have set up, and I look at, let me switch to one that I wanted to show you here. Okay, and if I go ahead and show you a Google Paid tracking number, I'll show you a little bit about how that's actually set up. All right. So a couple things to note about the receiving numbers that you may not have noticed as you were setting up your numbers as you're going through this process. You can have multiple receiving numbers. So you could have your phone calls ring to 2, 3, 4 receiving numbers at a time. And once you add multiple receiving numbers into this interface, you're going to see the ability to set how you want your calls to be routed to these different receiving numbers. So you could have them called to them simultaneously, or you could have them round robin, where the system evenly distributes calls across the multiple receiving numbers. You can also set call schedules for each of your receiving numbers. So if, for example, maybe you want all your calls to go to one number during the week and another number on the weekend, you could set up a schedule here for each of your tracking numbers. And you can get very granular down to the minute as far as how you'd like to allocate the phone calls across the days of the week and hours of the day. When you talk about setting up your tracking source, for most of your sources, it's going to be pretty straightforward where you can likely use just one of our predetermined sources. In some cases, you may want to do some custom tracking. And when you see that you choose custom tracking, there's a few new fields that pop up. One is referring URL and one is landing URL. In general, landing URL you would use when you control the inbound link. So in most advertising scenarios, you have some control over what the inbound link is. You think about like your links in Google AdWords, something like that. That's how you'd specify the source in that situation. But in situations where you can't control the link, that's where you'd want to use referring URL to help define the source. So you think about like a blog, maybe you're doing some advertising or promotion on a blog and you don't control the inbound link. That's when you'd want to use referring URL. And then one other field you'll see here is position. This basically tells our system how to prioritize looking at particular sources. And so the system will automatically assign these for you. So you usually don't have to worry about these. But in general, just so you know, the lower the position, the higher priority it is. So you generally want your more specific sources to have a lower position, and then the more general sources to be addressed later and thus have a higher position number. So we're happy to help you with setting up your custom tracking sources. I just wanted to make sure you knew about these fields and kind of what they were. Now, one thing as you're thinking about buying phone numbers that we often get questions about is vanity numbers. You'll see I have on my screen here now a website called 800forall.com. This website we partner with, and they specialize in collecting vanity numbers and toll-free numbers. So a lot of those hard-to-find original 800 numbers and vanity numbers, they have a lot of them. So you can search for a number here if you can't find it on our system, and you can choose to port it to us, and it will port within just about 3 business days. So it's a very quick porting process. And the numbers, the price for the numbers here range. You'll see 800 numbers are around $29, but as soon as they port over to our system, you just pay our normal rates. So you just have to pay an initial fee for 800 for all. So I wanted to mention that just because we often get questions about that if people are looking for vanity numbers. Now, if I go back over to the system here and we take a look at receiving numbers, so a few things I wanted to show you here that oftentimes people aren't aware of. If you click Edit next to any of your receiving numbers, you're going to see there's a few different configuration options that you can use. One is you can add a secondary number for any of your receiving numbers. And what this means is that the calls will fall back to a secondary number after a certain amount of time. So you can choose to, if calls aren't answered by the first receiving number within a certain amount of seconds, you can fall back to another number. Sometimes people will set it up where they have it fall back to their cell phone or something like that. You can also choose to have the system auto dial extensions. So maybe you want to get really specific about who you're forwarding calls to at your office. You can do that. And then also business hours. This is kind of a new configuration here. You can set what your business hours are for each of your receiving numbers. And the nice thing about this is in our auto tagging system, which I'll show you, by setting these hours, you're able to very quickly look at your calls and your reports and know if they came in during business hours or after business hours. And a lot of people like to see that because your call patterns may be very different after hours than they are during business hours. And especially when you're looking at how quickly are people answering the phone, how many missed calls are there, it's obviously very important to be able to distinguish between in business hours and out of business hours. And then custom number formats are something else that you'll see here. This is typically used when you have a situation where the phone number on your website is different than the receiving number for your tracking numbers. And we got a lot of questions about this. If you are in that situation, you would just add a custom format, and you'll see we've added an example here where you put in whatever the phone number is that's on your website as the custom format, and you choose phone number match. What this does is it tells our system to look for that phone number on the website and swap it to a tracking number. So if you're in that situation where the phone number on your website is different than your receiving numbers, that's when you'd want to use a custom format. If I scroll back up here and look at voice menus, this is a fairly new feature that we've added across the past 6 months. Voice menus are basically like IVR systems. So you can choose to set up a voice menu for your customer or your callers to experience when they call into your tracking numbers. This can be helpful because this can get people to the right place very quickly. And you can see that you can say exactly what you want the message to say, and you can add all your key press options. So, I want when people press 1, I want it to dial a certain number, and you can choose where you want it to go, and then you can choose to have the voice menu say something. So, maybe press 1 for sales, and then once the person presses 1, the system will say, thank you, we're now transferring you to sales. You can configure all of that in here, and you can also configure which tracking numbers you want this voice menu to apply to. So it's kind of a nice feature, and a lot of people have been very excited that we have that available now. Now, if we look over in this account, I wanted to show you geo-routing. This is another interesting feature which you may not have been aware of. Geo-routing, as this is pulling up, I'll explain it to you. Geo-routing is basically if somebody calls into one of your tracking numbers, you can have the system automatically route the call to your closest office. So if you have offices around the country, or maybe you have them up and down the East Coast or something like that, you can set up your office locations with zip codes and set radiuses around them, and you could have your calls automatically routed to the right place. So it's kind of a nice feature, and definitely if you are interested in using this, feel free to call us and we'd be happy to help you get it set up and tune it so that your calls are switching exactly as you want them to be. Now, let's see here. I'm going to switch back into another account and we're going to go to call settings. Okay. Call settings is an area where you're going to be able to configure a lot of your whispers and recording and caller ID settings for each of your tracking numbers. And it looks a little confusing at first, so I'll kind of walk you through it. Okay. So here you'll see that your configuration, and you by default have one configuration, and by default all of your tracking numbers are applied to that one configuration. But you can add different configurations and apply different tracking numbers to each of those configurations. The default one is always called account level, and you'll see what the different settings are within your options here. So default is always that recordings are on. You can turn that off at any time. There's no cost implications for having recordings on or off. You can also choose to have a message play for your callers. So for example, if you do have recordings on, a lot of people like to have a message that says, for quality assurance purposes, this call is being recorded, something like that. You can choose the gender and the language that you would like to have that message in. You can also enable or disable caller ID. You can also show the tracking number as the caller ID. So some people like this because, especially if they're having calls routed to their cell phone, for example, they want to know, they can look right at their phone and see that this is coming from my Google paid tracking number. So the actual caller ID that shows up on the phone call is the tracking number. So you can imagine you could save each of your tracking numbers into your cell phone, and then each time a call comes in, you see, oh, this is a Google paid call, or oh, this is a Facebook call. And then call whisper settings are those whispers that play to the person picking up the phone. And source announcement whisper is a very popular one where it announces the source of the call. So when you pick up the phone, you hear a little quick message that says, new call from Google Organic. Now, one kind of caution about these whispers is that they can often interfere with phone calls if there's a voicemail or a voice triage system that picks up the phones, like a recorded system. So you'll want to just kind of tune your whisper hours and your whisper timing. So, for example, you may want to skip the whisper when a call exceeds a certain amount of time, because what will happen is when your voicemail system picks up, the source announcement whisper is going to play to the voicemail, and the caller won't be connected until after that plays, and so your voicemail message will be cut off, so that your caller won't hear your whole voicemail message. So we can help you tune this, but if you do have source announcement whisper on and you're finding weird things happening where like you feel like your calls aren't connecting right, just let us know and we can help you tune this so that you get it right. Now let's talk a little bit about the tracking code that goes on your website. Let me pull that up for you. So as you're setting up your accounts, an important piece of this is having your tracking code put on your site. And your tracking code is what allows the phone number on your website to update to a tracking number based on how somebody comes to your website. It also tracks all that important visitor data that you see in your reporting. So things like search keywords and referring URLs and landing URLs. That's what collects all of this, is this tracking code. And this tracking code will remember how somebody originally found your website for up to 30 days. So if they came to your site maybe from like a PPC ad 3 weeks ago and then they came back to your site directly today, the system will remember that they originally found you through Google Paid. Now you can configure that. If you would rather not have the system remember that for 30 days, you can adjust that in your account settings. But that's usually what people want, is they want about a month window for the system to remember how somebody found the site. Now, I'm going to go to a couple FAQs that we often hear from people about the tracking script, and let me just pull up a slide here. Okay, so while this is pulling up, there's a few questions that we often get as people are getting their dynamic tracking script set up. One of them is, I tried coming to the site from one of my sources and the number didn't swap. What happened? Well, what the situation usually is that you're already cookied from another source, because you've been to your website before, and so you are likely not coming to your site for the first time from one of the sources that you're tracking. So what we usually recommend is that you use Chrome incognito mode. And you'll see, if I'm in Chrome right now, if I click on the Chrome, if I click on the File option here, you'll see a new incognito window option. That's going to open up a new window that has no history in it, so that you're able to test out your different sources and see if your numbers are swapping. Another question we often get, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, is what do I do if the phone number on my website is different from my receiving number? That's when you add a custom format under your receiving numbers, and you would do that by going to Manage Receiving Numbers and clicking Edit next to your receiving numbers. So we'd be happy to help you with that as well, but that's often something that people have questions about. And then what if I have more than one phone number listed on my website and I want each of them to swap to a tracking number? So maybe, for example, you've got a phone number for sales and a phone number for support. So you've got two toll-free numbers that always are showing on your website. You basically would just set up two sets of tracking numbers. So you'd have a Google Paid tracking number for your sales phone number and a Google Paid tracking number for your support phone number. So you'd have basically two lists of tracking numbers, so that there are different tracking numbers that can swap in for each of those phone numbers. And then how can I test that this is working, particularly for PPC visitors? One thing that I will bring up, and it's in our FAQ page, and this often is helpful for people, is we have some very specific instructions that you can use to test your PPC, if your PPC numbers are tracking correctly, and you don't have to actually click on one of your ads to do this. And these instructions are in our FAQ section under the Getting Started category, and they're basically a series of instructions that you can use. You need to open up a new incognito window in Chrome, and then go through a series of little places that you go within your URL bar, and it will simulate a PPC click, and so you should be able to see your PPC tracking number swapping in. If you have any questions about it, or if it looks a little confusing, feel free to call us and we're happy to help you do it. You'll see there's instructions here for testing Google paid tracking number swapping as well as Bing paid tracking number swapping. So we're happy to help you with either one of those. Now, as we think about reporting, I'm going to hop over to another demo account here. One thing that's really important, just as I'm pulling up our reports, is if you're tracking online sources, you want to make sure that you've linked your call tracking metrics account to Google Analytics. And you can do that in your account settings. And why that's really important is that that is a way that we're able to feed in paid PPC information in particular. So you're able to see what match keyword somebody used, which ad group, which campaign, all of that rich information that allows you to see which of your ad groups are performing best. That comes through that Google Analytics linkage. Also, an important thing about linking to Google Analytics is that you can then have your calls pushed to Google Analytics as events each time they come in. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well later when I talk about integrations, but just a good kind of thing to just write down as a to-do is just double check in your account settings and make sure that you've got your account linked to Google Analytics. That'll make sure that your reporting looks as rich as you'll see it in these different reports I'm going to show you. What I'm looking at here right now is the call log. This is kind of the central hub report where you see all your calls coming in real time. There's obviously all the kind of high-level critical information across the top here about each of your calls. A few that may not have been obvious to you as you're getting used to this is the sale icon is a way for you to mark calls as closed, and you can assign customer service reps to each of your calls. So depending on how you're looking to use the system, some people use this and some people don't. But if you are looking to kind of build out true ROI scores for your calls and you want to actually see what's converting and how much revenue you're actually getting from each of your sources, this is a good place to do it. For each of your calls, you can come in and do that. You can also listen to the audio for each of your calls if you have the recording on. You can block a caller. So if you have a telemarketer that keeps calling, or maybe somebody who keeps getting the wrong number for some reason, you can block them so they can't call your tracking number anymore. And you can also exclude a call from reports. So maybe you're doing some test calls and you don't want that to skew your reporting for the month. You can exclude a call right over here. Now, if you click View next to any of your calls, you're going to open up the detail for the call. Obviously, notes, you can add any notes. You can also add tags for each of your calls. Tags are nice because when I show you some of the other reports, you can filter your reports by tags. So you can start to use a tagging system for your calls to help you kind of break down different categories of calls. Also, over here on the right, you're going to see the visitor that was matched to your caller with their likelihood score. And again, if you start to see these likelihood scores not as high as you'd like them to be, it could be because you have a lot of traffic coming through that source and you should add another tracking number for that source. Caller history will show you any history for that caller. So if they had called before, you would see that show up here. And then paid information. So this is demo data here. That's why these words aren't real words. But in here is where you would see the paid information for your call if it was a paid source. So you'll see the AdWords campaign, the match keyword, the actual ad group, the ad position, all this rich information that allows you to get really specific in looking at how your different AdWords campaigns are performing. Now, one thing I'll note here, and it's not here on our demo account, but you should see it on yours, is there's an enable desktop notifications that you can click right up here next to the export button. The nice thing about that is if you enable that, you're going to get a little pop-up in the corner of your window each time a new phone call comes in through your tracking number. A lot of people like that. It allows them to just kind of keep reminded to go into the call log, look at the calls, listen to recordings. So it's just kind of a good reminder, and you can always turn it off within your browser settings. But that button should appear here. I don't have it here on the actual demo account though. One other thing that you might find helpful within the call log is the email option. This option basically allows you to email a notification of a call to somebody. So maybe you just listen to a call and you wanted to tell your staff, great job on this call, or hey, Joe, can you follow up on this call? You can choose to email that a notification of that particular call to anyone you wish, along with a message. And you can also export the call log. And this is a very popular feature, particularly with the advertisers that we work with who want to export all of this data into Excel and filter it and slice and dice it and kind of use it for their own internal reporting. The export's right here, and there are different filters that you can choose as you go through the export process about exactly what you want to export out of your call log. Now, I mentioned tags here. One other thing I wanted to mention about tags is that there's a way you can set up auto tagging in your account as well, so that each time a call comes in that matches a certain criteria, it'll be auto tagged in a certain way. And I'll show you over here. If you I'll go into this demo account, and under the reports menu is a manage tags option, and you can manage your tags, and you can choose to have it's set up so that each time a new caller calls in, somebody who's never called your tracking numbers before, it's tagged as new call. Or maybe you want to have length of call as the option. So maybe you have calls that are longer than 2 minutes are, good leads or something like that. You can use those types of rules, time of call, etc., to do auto tags. And that way all of your calls that come in that match that criteria will be auto tagged with that tag. And then when you go to do your report filtering, you're able to kind of cut things easily by those tags. Now, hop back over to the demo here, and let me show you the overview report. If you've started getting phone calls in your account, you've probably started to look at this report. This is kind of the high level, has the high level data all in one place. One thing I'll note up here is this filter box. You'll see this across all of our reports. Here's where you can filter by tag. So this is where you may want to use some of that auto tagging to filter things out. You can also filter by tracking source, tracking number, call length. This is often a best practice that we hear about. Is a lot of people will just immediately, when they're going through and doing their monthly reporting, they'll filter out calls that are less than, let's say a minute long, or less than a certain length of time, whatever is right for your particular business. That way you kind of filter out the noise, so any telemarketers, any wrong numbers, and you're just looking truly at calls that came in that were substantial conversations, or were answered phone calls. So you can do that always by clicking the filter button across any of our reports. Also, one thing to notice, and I'll hop over to this account here, under the reports menu, there's a manage reports option. And this is where you can go and create custom reports, and you can set up schedules for your reports. So you'll see the overview report is the default. It will always be here for all of your accounts as default unless you delete it. But you could choose, for example, to have this overview report emailed out. Let's say you have a management team, you want to email this to every week or every month. You can click that edit schedule button and you can set up an email. So you can have the subject of it, who do you want it coming from, type in what you want the message to say, how often do you want it to go out. You can get very specific about when it runs, and then you can set up your email recipients. So you can do that with any of the reports that you build in here. And if you ever want to work on building a custom report, you just click add a new report, and you can name your report, and I'll just do one here. And you can choose whether you want the timeline, which is that kind of high-level line graph. You can choose if you want that in your report. And then you can choose if you want it in the menu, and that would mean that it appears here in your reports menu. And then you can also choose to include your call log or not. So that'll basically just put the call log at the bottom of this. And then you just click create your report. And then you can start adding graphs. So you can do lots of different cuts of data. You'll see all the different metrics you can choose from here. And then the dimensions. So you could filter things lots of different ways by tracking numbers and by receiving numbers. So you can play around with this, and you can also choose whether you want your charts to show up as bars or pies. And you can add as many graphs within your custom report as you'd like. So if you start getting into creating custom reports and you need any help from us, definitely let us know, because it starts to get kind of complicated quickly. So we're happy to help kind of figure out what's the right way to create the report that you're looking for. Now, if we hop on over to call reports in our demo, call reports probably tend to be some of the more popular reports because they kind of cut your data down in lots of different popular ways that people want to see it. So you'll see calls by over here on the left. You can see all your calls broken down by day of week, hour of day, landing page. You can click on here to get the breakdown of landing page, referring site, search terms, etc. And then underneath of that, you're going to see your PPC reports. So if you're running any tracking sources or tracking numbers that are tracking paid internet advertising, such as Google AdWords or Bing Ad Center, then you're going to see these reports populated. And just a reminder, you do need to have your account linked to Google Analytics to see these populated. But this is really great because this is where you can see the actual ad keyword that it matched to in AdWords. You can see the campaign. And so for each of your calls that come in, they're going to start feeding into this report. So you're going to be able to see the number of calls that fall into each of your campaigns, each of your ad groups, etc. And you can always adjust the date range for all of these reports, and you can also always filter them. So these, and you can also export them. That's obviously very important as well. So you can use them for your internal reporting. And then finally, there's the ROI reports I wanted to show you. The ROI reports are populated based on a couple of factors that you need to input. So one is your monthly advertising spend. So you would want to come in and say how much you spend on each of your sources each month. And you can set it so that it just has the same amount every month, so you don't have to populate this every month. The system's going to automatically pull in how many calls come in from that source. And then you may recall back in the call log, I showed you that place where you can input closure information for each call. Well, that's going to feed into here and give you a revenue for the month for that particular source, so you're able to get an ROI score. So this is pretty interesting because you can see very quickly what your ROIs or return on investment is for each of your advertising channels. And this does take a little work to populate, obviously, because you need to make sure that you enter that sales information for each of your calls. But what we're hearing some people are doing now is they're giving access to their customer service reps to have access to the call log, so that as they're taking calls, they can go in and input calls that they close. And it's really quick and easy for them to do that. And that way you don't have to do it. You can have your team do that. So that's the ROI report. One report within this ROI section that's interesting is the customer service rep metrics report. This breaks it down by customer service rep. So this will tell you how many calls did they answer, how many calls they closed, their star rating. So you may recall when you click that sale icon in the call log, you can rate the call as well. This is a really interesting performance management tool, and we're hearing more and more people using this as they're looking to kind of have some good objective data to give back to their team to show how each of them are performing on the phones. Now, one other report that may be helpful for you is I'm going to go into the account usage report, and that's under the reports menu. This will show you a breakdown of just how you're using the system. So this is an account level usage report, so it'll show you how many calls and minutes are used for each day within a date range. You can also view it by number. This account doesn't have any tracking numbers in it right now, but if it did, it would show for each tracking number how many minutes it's been used. So some people like to see this to kind of get a sense of just how active things are, and helps them for just accounting purposes to kind of see what the usage is. There's also a report like this at an agency level. So if you're an agency, if you set your account up as an agency and you have clients within your agency, if you click on agency usage, you're going to be able to see each of your accounts within your agency listed, and you can see how many numbers they've had for that date range, how many phone calls, minutes, and then what the total charges have been. So that if you're looking to bill back your customers, you could see how much you paid for their call tracking service, so you could bill them back or add a markup on top of that. Now, I want to talk a little bit about integrations. So I'm going to go to the account settings page here within the settings menu. I talked about Google Analytics already, so here's where you link with Google Analytics right here on the Google tab, and it's pretty easy to link your Google Analytics account. You just need to make sure that you have access to your Google Analytics account because it's going to ask you to verify which email address it should be using, and then it's just going to verify that you actually have access to that Google Analytics account. You can link that, and that happens immediately, and then typically within about 6 hours, you'll start to see all that information sync back and forth. Actually, and while I'm talking about Google Analytics, one thing I'll show you here is, just move this. We recently wrote an article up, and you'll find this in our blog, and I've got it here. This is an article that just talks about how you can use your linkage with Google Analytics to actually also see your calls show up as conversions in AdWords. So this is obviously really interesting for a lot of people because they'd love to be able to see their calls show up right in AdWords as conversions, along with seeing your online conversions. Imagine being able to see your calls right in AdWords as conversions. This article here goes through the process for how to do that. So the first step is connecting with Google Analytics. We just showed you how to do that. The next thing is in your Google Analytics account, you want to add goals. And what these goals are is they're basically set up to be configured around the calls that are going to be coming in from your call tracking metrics account. So each time a call comes in through one of your tracking numbers, it's going to show up as an event in your Google Analytics account. And so these goals are going to start to track that, and basically each time that happens, it's going to, you're going to get counted as achieving that goal. And once you've set up your goals, and this goes through the whole process of how to set up the goal, then there's a little video here about how that's going to then start to sync into AdWords. And there's just a little process here where you need to set up conversions in AdWords, and you set up a conversion around the goal that you've set up in Google Analytics. So once you do that, there may be a few hour delay, but then you're going to start to see your calls sync into AdWords as conversions. So this is obviously really powerful for a lot of people who are looking to track this. So I wanted to show you that. Like I said, that is on our blog that we recently wrote up, and we're going to be adding this to our frequently asked questions as well. Now, if I hop back over to account settings, a couple other integrations I wanted to just let you know about. Salesforce and HubSpot are two other systems that you can integrate with. Those are CRM systems, so if you use either of those, you can integrate our system with theirs so that your incoming calls show up in Salesforce or HubSpot. You can also choose Premium Caller ID here in the account settings. This basically pings the Targus Info database, which is Targus is a big company that specializes in collecting information, caller ID information. And so you can choose to have this happen each time one of your phone calls come in, or you can choose to do it manually from within your call log. And what it does is it looks in the Targus database to see if we have additional caller ID information on that caller. And if we do, it's going to pull back things like full billing address, full billing name, full business name, a lot of rich information that, as you can imagine, could be really helpful if you're looking to build a mailing list or, kind of come up with your lead follow-up list. If you want to mail postcards, things like that. You'll be able to start to see all that information right in your call log, and you can export all of that out. So you can enable that right on the account settings page here, and you'll see there is an additional fee for doing this, but you only get charged if there's a match. So you only get charged if we're able to pull back the information from Targus. White label is another area you'll see in here. This particular account I have is not set up as a white label account, but basically if you are looking to white label your call tracking metrics account for your users, maybe you're an agency and you want to have your clients be able to log into this, you'll just need to make sure you've chosen the Platinum plan, and if you are not on the Platinum plan, you could always change your plan by going up here. And then you can, you'll have the option to set up lots of different white labeling aspects. So things like, what do you want the URL to be? How do you want emails to show up as they're coming out of the system? You have your logo displayed. You'll have your own help page displayed on the website. So it makes it really look like your own website. And then manage users is one other area I wanted to show you, and then we'll be done shortly so I can turn it over to any questions that people have. Manage users right here under the settings menu. You can add new users at any time, and when you click add new user, you're going to be able to choose what access level you want them to have. Let's see, this is pulling up. Okay, so you'd put in their email address, what their name is, and once you do that, they're going to be sent an email with information about how to access the site, and then you can choose what level of access you want them to have. If you're an agency, you can choose which account you want them to have administrator access to, or report manager access to, or report viewer access to. If you're not an agency, you'll just see those three options without all the accounts listed below it. Administrator basically means that they have the same access that you do, where they can see all the configuration options, the billing options, all that. They can see everything. Report manager means that they can see all of the reports and the call log, and they can make edits to the reports and to the call log. And then report viewer is just that they can view reports and the call log. They can't make any edits to it. So, if you were looking to give access to your team, I probably would suggest report manager if you're going to be wanting them to enter things into the call log, for example. If you're just going to want them to be viewing reports, then you can just give them report viewer access. And then notifications under the settings menu is another area that's could be really helpful for you. You can add a new notification. And there's two different types of notifications that we offer. One is a call notification, and this will basically send an email out to whoever you want it to go to anytime something particular happens from your tracking numbers. So for example, you could choose to have an email go out every time a phone call comes in through a specific source or through a specific tracking number, or maybe only when it goes out to a specific receiving number. And then you can also kind of fine tune this a little bit. So maybe you only want it to go out when a call is greater than 60 seconds long, or only go out when there's no answer. Or maybe you want it to go out only when the calls are answered. So you can kind of fine tune this, but these are nice because these are immediate notifications that go out over email, and it says, you've just gotten a call, and here's a link to the call so that people can go right to the call in the call log. The other type of notification is our Daily Digest. The Daily Digest is an email that goes out once a day, and it's basically a summary listing of the phone calls that have come in through that day. So you can say who you want it to go to, when do you want it to run, and then you can do some conditions here as well. So do you only want to include specific sources or tracking numbers, etc. But like I said, it just goes out once a day, and it's a nice kind of summary of all the calls that have come in across that day. Now, the last thing I wanted to show you was the billing, and you've probably seen this, you've probably been to this page as you were kind of getting your account set up, but that's under the settings menu. And this is just where you can set your recharge options. So one important thing that we often get questions about is how you should do your auto recharge. You want to make sure that we always recommend make sure that you've got your recharge settings such that your card's not going to get charged a whole bunch of times each month. So as you start to use the service, you're going to start to see how much you use each month. And so you can set up your recharge so that you typically only have your credit card charged once a month. So, maybe for your particular account, the recharge settings should be, when my account falls below $15, recharge it back up to $100. And that way you only have to do this once a month. And then you'll choose which credit card you want it to go on. And the other thing here, I don't have any credit cards listed under this demo account, but one thing we recently rolled out last week is the ability to have a primary and a secondary credit card. This is important because if for some reason something happens with your credit card, maybe your credit card gets stolen or it's expired or something, you don't ever want that to potentially jeopardize your phone numbers from being released if they come up for renewal while your credit card is deactivated. So you can always have a secondary credit card here, and you'll see in your particular interface, you'll have the ability to add a new payment method, and you can set it as primary or secondary. So we recommend that you try to do that because that way you make sure that there's never an issue with any of your tracking numbers coming up for renewal and your credit card for some reason not being able to replenish the balance. And so we'll come back over here to the presentation and we'll wrap some things up here. Let's see. So kind of in a nutshell, so we talked about a lot of different features here, a lot of different things that you can do with your account. Really, in a nutshell, as we think about this, there's 5 things that we recommend people make sure they do as they're getting started. Make sure that you've got tracking numbers for each of your sources. Make sure that you've got the tracking code on your website. If you need any help putting that code on your site, if you feel like you've tested it and it just doesn't seem to be working, let us know. That's what we spend a lot of our time doing, is just helping troubleshoot that. Third, make sure you link your account to Google Analytics. Fourth, configure your call settings. So that's where you kind of figure out, do you want recordings on? Do you want any whispers playing to your callers? Do you want any whispers playing to your receivers? Getting that set up right. And then 5, give access to anybody else who needs this. So is there anybody on your team that you want to be able to start using this? Get them indoctrinated early so that they start to make this part of their daily workflow. And if you need our help in orienting anybody to the system and giving them a little walkthrough, feel free to give us a call, and we're happy to do that. Thank you for participating, and appreciate you calling in. I hope this was helpful. We'll be sending up a follow-up email to everybody with this deck so that you've got it, and then we'll have just a brief little survey so you can give us any feedback on the webinar. So you'll see our contact information there, and please let us know if we can help in any way. Thank you.